When we think about D-Day, we usually picture the incredible bravery on the beaches, right? The chaos, the heroism. But what if I told you the battle was pretty much decided before the first soldier even hit the sand? This is that story. It's about D-Day not just as a fight between soldiers, but as a war of factories, a massive math problem that was solved thousands of miles from the battlefield.
So, let me paint you a picture. It's just before dawn, June 6, 1944, on the coast of Normandy. For the German soldiers hunkered down in their bunkers, it's just another cold, quiet morning. They have no idea that in a few short hours, their entire world is about to be turned upside down. And to see this all unfold, we're going to look through the eyes of one man, Oberleutnant Klaus Richter. He's a German artillery officer, a seasoned pro who's seen the brutal fighting on the Eastern Front. This is a guy who knows the difference between propaganda posters and the cold, hard reality of war. And on this particular morning, that reality was about to get, well, unbelievable. As the first light starts to creep over the horizon, Richter's scanning the English Channel, and something just feels off. It's not the tide, it's not a fog bank rolling in, it's something else, something huge, something that just shouldn't be there. Imagine you're him, right? You're peering through your binoculars and you see this smudge on the horizon. But it's not shrinking, it's growing, it's getting wider, darker, and it's slowly resolving into shapes. Hundreds of shapes. Now wait, thousands. You can just feel the slow-motion dread as he realizes what he's looking at is impossible. And that's really the only way you could describe it. A floating metropolis, just sailing out of the mist. At that very moment, before his guns have even fired a single shot, Richter knows. He knows it's over.
Now get this. German intelligence had predicted the Allies might be able to scrape together 3,000 ships, and that alone seemed like a huge number. The reality? Nearly 7,000 vessels. This wasn't just an army showing up. This was the entire industrial power of a nation, packed onto boats and pointed right at him.
And here is where it gets almost absurd. Richter is staring at the end of his world. He frantically gets on the radio to high command, and what does he get back? Denial. They literally don't believe him. They tell him it's probably just a small raid, that the weather's too bad for a full invasion. They couldn't even begin to imagine what he was seeing. And there's a very good reason for that blindness.
So to understand why his bosses were so convinced he was wrong, we need to kind of zoom out and get inside the German mindset at the time. They truly believed they were untouchable inside something they called Fortress Europe, all protected by this supposedly impenetrable barrier.
Yeah, the Atlantic Wall. In all the propaganda, it was this solid line of concrete bunkers and giant guns stretching for thousands of miles. But Richter, the guy actually sitting in one of those bunkers, he knew the truth. It was a joke. More like a picket fence than a wall, full of gaps, weak spots, stretched way too thin. A total nightmare for any real soldier trying to defend.
The biggest mistake they made, though, was just simple geography. All German intelligence was absolutely certain, 100% positive, that the invasion had to come at Pas-de-Calais. I mean, it's the shortest route across the channel, right? Makes sense. So they parked their best troops, the entire 15th Army, right there. They figured Normandy, where Richter was, that was just a sideshow, a diversion at best.
So why were they so wrong?
Because of this. Operation Fortitude. It was an absolute masterpiece of military deception. The Allies created a whole phantom army. We're talking inflatable tanks, fake radio signals, double agents, the whole 9 yards. All of it designed to make the Germans look one way, while the real punch was coming from somewhere else entirely. And boy, did it work.
And if that wasn't enough, you have this perfect storm of bad luck for the Germans. A nasty storm blows through on June 5th, and their weather guys say, no way, an invasion is impossible in this slop. So the alert status gets lowered. Senior officers relax. Even the legendary Field Marshal Rommel thought it was safe enough to pop back to Germany to celebrate his wife's birthday. They were caught completely, totally flat-footed.
But here's the real kicker. What Richter was staring at across the water, it wasn't just a failure of intelligence. It was the physical result of an unsolvable math problem. In a lot of ways, the war had already been won and lost, not on the beaches of Normandy, but in the factories of Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Manchester.
And that really is the question, isn't it? It wasn't just about bravery or strategy on that one day. It was about the cold, hard, staggering industrial numbers that made the Allied victory, well, pretty much inevitable. Let's look at the math.
Okay, let's start in the air. On D-Day, the Allies flew over 14,000 combat missions. The German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, they managed maybe 300. That's not a typo. For every single German plane that got into the air, there were more than 40 Allied planes waiting for it. This wasn't air superiority, it was total air ownership, and it meant any German attempt to move reinforcements to the beaches was basically a suicide mission.
Now on the ground, you had these two completely different philosophies clashing. Germany was all about building these complex, technologically amazing, but difficult-to-produce machines. The Allies, and especially the United States, had a much simpler idea. Just build more of everything. A lot more.
Just let that number sink in for a second. 29,000 tanks from just one country in just 1 year. To put that in perspective, Germany's best month of tank production during the entire war didn't even hit 2,000. It was an industrial tidal wave that they just could not stop.
A perfect example is the tank battle. The German Tiger tank, an absolute beast, a masterpiece of engineering. And Allied tank crews were terrified of it, but it was a strategic dead end. They were so complex and expensive. For every one Tiger they painstakingly pieced together, the Allies were just stamping out dozens of the simpler but brutally effective Sherman tanks. The Allied plan wasn't to outdesign the enemy, it was to literally bury them under a mountain of steel.
Okay, so let's bring all these huge abstract numbers, all these tanks and planes, back down to our man on the ground, Oberleutnant Richter. For him, this wasn't a math problem anymore. It was a terrifying physical reality staring him right in the face.
His artillery battery opens fire, and his men are good. They're professionals. They score a direct hit on a U.S. destroyer. For one single fleeting moment, there's a cheer. It feels like a real fight they can win. But the fleet, it doesn't even slow down. The hole in the formation where that ship was just fills in. And then the entire ocean answers back with an avalanche of naval gunfire.
The German defenders on beaches like Omaha fought with unbelievable courage. They inflicted terrible casualties, but the cost for them was just complete annihilation. Roughly 1,200 casualties in a single day for that division. A huge chunk of their fighting force just erased by this methodical, industrial process of destruction.
And this brings us to Richter's final, chilling realization. All their training, all their courage, their perfectly aimed cannons, none of it mattered. They weren't in a fair fight. They were like a beautifully crafted sword trying to stop a giant, steam-powered drop hammer. The outcome was never, ever in doubt.
You know, Richter's story really forces us to look past the battlefield and into the factories. It changes how we see D-Day. It's not just this singular, heroic day, but maybe the unavoidable final act of an industrial war. And it leaves us with a really tough question. When you're up against a tidal wave of pure math, what does courage really count for?